My name is Clara. For the better part of 2 decades, my life has been a series of departures and arrivals, a rhythm dictated by the needs of strangers in forgotten corners of the world. I'm a nurse with the Global Health Corps, a vocation that chose me as much as I chose it. I've set broken bones in the dust of makeshift clinics, held the hands of mothers watching their children fight off fevers under mosquito nets, and learned to say "it will be okay" in a dozen languages, sometimes believing it myself. It is a life of profound purpose and profound loneliness, a trade I made long ago. This last deployment had been different. It wasn't for a sudden earthquake or a burgeoning epidemic. It was for my daughter, Lily. 18 years old, with a mind as bright and vast as the open ocean and a passion for the planet that humbled me. When she was accepted into the prestigious environmental science program at the University of Washington, her joy was a sunburst, bright enough to light up my entire world. But that light came with a shadow, the cost. I looked at my modest savings, at the salary of a field nurse, and knew it wouldn't be enough. So I took the one-year post in a remote region of Southeast Asia. The hardship pay, the isolation stipend, it was the only way. It was for her. I came home to Port Blossom in the third week of December. The ferry cut through the slate-gray water of the Puget Sound, the scent of salt and damp pine, a welcome I'd craved for months. Mist clung to the evergreen-choked hillsides, blurring the edges of the world into a watercolor painting. This little coastal town, with its Victorian houses and salty air, was the only anchor I'd ever really known. It was where I had bought a small house on Hemlock Lane, a place I hoped would finally feel like a permanent address for Lily and me. My parents still lived in the house I grew up in, a sturdy craftsman that always seemed to be holding its breath. As I walked up the familiar flagstone path, a wreath of holly and red ribbon on the door, I felt the old, familiar tightening in my chest. It was the feeling of bracing oneself, a posture I'd learned in this very house. The welcome was exactly as I expected, warm on the surface, with an undercurrent of something cool and unspoken. My mother, Helen, hugged me with a brisk efficiency, her cheek smelling of hand lotion and faint disappointment. My father, Arthur, gave my shoulder a firm squeeze, his eyes already looking past me toward the television. My younger sister, Isabel, or Izzy, offered a glittering smile and an air kiss. "Look what the tide washed in," she'd said, a joke that landed with the soft thud of an old resentment. And then there was Lily. She stood back, a little hesitant, and when I pulled her into my arms, she felt thinner than I remembered. The hug was real, a moment of pure, undiluted love that made the rest of the room fade away. But I could feel the tension in her shoulders, the exhaustion humming just beneath her skin. She had my dark hair, but her father's thoughtful, deep-set eyes, and right now, they were shadowed with a weariness that looked too old for her. "You look tired, sweet pea," I murmured into her hair. She pulled back, forcing a smile. "First semester. It's a beast." We gathered in the dining room for Christmas Eve dinner. The fluorescent lights of the kitchen spilled into the room, making my mother's cedar plank salmon look pale and the green beans listless. The air was thick with the weight of things unsaid, a family tradition as sacred as the angel on top of the tree. My father carved the fish, my mother fussed over the placement of the forks, and Izzy recounted a dramatic story about a misunderstanding with her landlord, casting herself as the witty, beleaguered heroine. I watched Lily across the table. She picked at her food, her posture ramrod straight, as if holding herself together required a conscious, physical effort. I remembered that feeling, the bone-deep exhaustion of a life lived on the knife's edge of just enough. I had promised her it would be different. I had sacrificed a year of her life to make sure of it. After a lull in the conversation, I chose my moment, keeping my voice gentle. "Lily," I began, "I just wanted to check in. Was the money I sent each month enough for your dorm and everything? I know textbooks can be a shock." I looked at her, expecting a nod, maybe a detail about a surprisingly expensive chemistry book. Instead, she looked utterly puzzled. She set her fork down. "What money?" A cold stone dropped into the pit of my stomach. "The money I sent. For you. The $1,200 a month." Her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. She tilted her head, a familiar gesture from her childhood when she was trying to solve a puzzle. "What are you talking about, Mom?" The air in the room changed. It was no longer just tense, it was electric. Across the table, my mother's face went rigid, her skin suddenly as pale as the tablecloth. My father shifted in his heavy oak chair, the wood groaning in protest. Izzy, mid-sip from her wine glass, suddenly found the Cabernet Sauvignon to be the most fascinating thing she had ever seen. "I sent it," I said, my voice quiet but firm, my gaze fixed on Lily. "To the joint account. The one Dad set up years ago for international transfers. 1,200 for you, and 800 for Mom and Dad to help with the house." Lily's eyes widened. She turned her head slowly, looking first at my mother, then my father. "You sent me money?" she asked me, her voice barely a whisper. "Every month, sweet pea. On the first. It was for your rent, your food, your books. I didn't want you to have to worry about anything but your studies." She started, her voice trembling. "I thought you couldn't afford it. Grandma Helen said, she said you were stretched so thin, that your contract wasn't what you'd hoped." "Oh, is that the apple crumble I smell?" Izzy interrupted, her voice painfully bright. "I thought we weren't having dessert, Mom." What a lovely surprise. I didn't look away from Lily. I didn't raise my voice. I just waited. "What else did Grandma Helen say?" I asked softly. Lily's gaze drifted from my mother's frozen face back to mine. "She said you were under a lot of stress. That you wanted to help, but you just couldn't. And that I shouldn't bring it up with you, that it would make you feel guilty and upset." The silence that followed wasn't loud or dramatic. It was heavy, suffocating, like a wool blanket soaked in water. My mother dabbed the corner of her lips with her napkin, a gesture of tidy denial. My father poured more water into his glass with an unsteady hand, the clinking sound echoing in the stillness. "Wait," Lily said, the confusion on her face slowly hardening into a terrible, dawning understanding. "You actually sent the money?" "Yes," I said. "To Grandpa's account?" "Yes." She turned to them, her expression not yet accusatory, just wounded and lost. "You told me she couldn't help," she said to my mother. "You told me she didn't have it." My mother stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Well, this has all turned terribly unpleasant. I think I'll put the kettle on for tea." She retreated to the kitchen, her back ramrod straight. "You let me think she didn't care." Lily's voice cracked on the last word. It wasn't a shout. It was the sound of a worldview collapsing. "Oh, she's being so dramatic," Izzy muttered into her wine. "She's exhausted," I replied, my voice dangerously low. She got through her first semester of university believing her mother had abandoned her financially. "She's 18, Clara, not a child," Izzy snapped, her composure finally cracking. "Not everything is about her." The injustice of that statement, from her, was so profound it left me breathless. My father finally looked up, his expression a miserable mix of guilt and defiance. "Now, let's all just take a breath. It's Christmas Eve." "You told me she couldn't afford to help," Lily said again, her voice stronger now, edged with steel. "You said she didn't want to be a burden. You said," she trailed off, her eyes finding mine. And in that moment, I knew she saw it all. Not just the stolen money, but the whole architecture of our family, built on a foundation of my designated gratitude and their unspoken entitlement. The years of subtle manipulations, the quiet sidelining, the narrative that I was the lucky one, the one who owed them. "I worked 2 jobs," Lily said, her voice now shaking with a grief so deep it was almost rage. "I worked at the campus coffee shop until midnight, and then I had a weekend shift at the bookstore. I lived on instant noodles and free bagels from the cafe. I almost dropped my organic chemistry class because I couldn't afford the lab materials." "Oh, for heaven's sake," my mother said, returning from the kitchen, holding nothing. "You survived, didn't you? Stop acting like it's some great tragedy." That was it. The final, brittle thread of my patience snapped. I stood up, my chair making no sound on the rug. Lily stood with me, a mirror of my own resolve. "I'm going with you," she said. I didn't argue. I didn't look at any of them. I just walked to the front door, plucked our coats from the rack, and left the house that had never truly felt like home. We didn't speak in the car. Lily stared out the passenger window, the festive lights of our neighbors' homes blurring past. My own hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. The silence was a living thing between us, filled with 10 months of lies and a lifetime of carefully constructed falsehoods. I wanted to say something, anything, to fix it, but I knew better. I had been her, sitting beside a well-meaning adult, trying not to fall apart because the pieces felt too small to ever put back together. Instead of driving aimlessly, I headed for the coast, pulling into the deserted parking lot of the Point Wilson Lighthouse. The beam swept across the dark, churning water in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The only sound was the mournful call of the foghorn and the wind whipping around the car. Was it really every month? She asked, her voice small against the vastness of the night. Every month, I confirmed. Like clockwork. 1,200 for you. 800 for them. I have the transfer receipts for every single one. She nodded once, her eyes fixed on the sweeping light. I watched her, trying to decipher the pain in her silence. Was it anger? Grief? Betrayal? All of it, I supposed, braided together into a heavy rope in her heart. You thought I didn't want to help, I said quietly. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer for a long moment. I fought the instinct to reach for her hand, to offer a comfort she wasn't ready to receive. She needed space for the truth to settle, as sharp and cold as the winter air. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes glistening in the faint light from the dashboard. I thought I didn't matter anymore, she whispered, and the words shattered what was left of my composure. I thought, maybe you were finally free of all of it, of me, and you just didn't want to look back. I closed my eyes, the pain of her confession a physical blow. Oh, Lily, I breathed. No, never. We drove to a small, quiet inn on the outskirts of town, the kind with a hand-painted wooden sign and pots of winter pansies by the door. Everything else was closed. It was Christmas, after all. The night clerk, a kind-faced man with a book of poetry open on the desk, didn't ask any questions. I gave him my credit card and didn't flinch at the holiday rate. The room was clean and warm, smelling of lemon polish and old wood. It was blessedly anonymous. 2 queen beds, a small table, a single armchair. Lily took off her shoes and sat on the edge of the bed farthest from the door, curling into herself. I couldn't afford groceries some weeks, she said to the floral bedspread. I'd go to the student union and see if there were any events with free pizza. And every time I thought about calling you, about asking for just a little help, I'd hear Grandma's voice in my head saying, "Don't be a burden. Your mother is doing so much already." She looked up at me. She made me feel like asking for what you'd already promised was a crime. I sat down in the armchair, the space between us a chasm of their making. So you just stopped asking, I said. She nodded. I stopped expecting. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. I know what that feels like. Later, after Lily had cried herself into an exhausted sleep, I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen felt harsh in the dim room. First, I logged into my international bank account. I found the recurring transfer I'd set up what felt like a lifetime ago. With a few clicks, the $800 monthly payment to my parents was canceled. The transaction was small, digital, but it felt monumental, like turning a key in a lock I hadn't known I was trapped behind. And then I sat there, staring at the screen, the full weight of it crashing down on me. They didn't just steal money. They stole Lily's peace of mind. They stole her first taste of independence and tainted it with fear and scarcity. They stole my peace, letting me believe my daughter was thriving when she was struggling. They had stolen this precious year from both of us. And a cold, terrifying thought surfaced. What else did they take? My chest tightened. The house. My house on Hemlock Lane. The one Izzy had pleaded to stay in while I was away. Rent was astronomical, she'd cried over the phone. It was impossible to save for a down payment. They would look after the place, she'd promised. They'd cover the mortgage payments, maintain the garden, keep it safe so I wouldn't have to worry. It was the only reason I didn't rent it out to strangers, the only reason I didn't sell it. It's family, I'd told myself. You can trust family. With trembling fingers, I navigated to my mortgage lender's online portal. I typed in my username and password and held my breath. The page loaded. I stared at the payment history. Nothing. Not a single payment in 10 months. My blood ran cold. The screen showed a string of red notices, payment overdue. My brain scrambled for an explanation. A website glitch. A delay in processing. Anything but the truth. But there it was, a clear, damning record of neglect. Had they just let it slide? Was my house, the one stable thing I had built, tumbling into foreclosure? I sat motionless, the laptop heavy on my knees, the only light in the room reflecting off the screen where my financial ruin was laid bare. Isabel hadn't just failed to pay. She had actively let my dream default. Then my eyes caught a small hyperlink under the ominous red banner, View Account Status. I clicked. A new window opened. Loan status, active, payments paused under temporary hardship forbearance. Date filed, 10 months ago. Filed by Clara Evans. I froze. A hardship pause. Filed in my name. The house wasn't in foreclosure, not yet. It was safe, for now. But someone had impersonated me. Someone had called my bank, used my personal information, and fraudulently filed paperwork to stop the payments, all while living in my home for free. There was only one person who had the keys, the motive, and the audacity. In 3 days, it would be the 27th of December. I would be standing on my own front porch, knocking on my own door. And nothing about our lives would ever be the same again. But to understand the depth of that moment, you have to understand the years that built it. I was 5 when Arthur and Helen adopted me. Before them, my life was a fractured collage of foster homes. I remember ceilings more than faces, the one with the water stain that looked like a sad dog, the one with the crack that ran from the light fixture to the corner. I remember the shifting rules, the different smells of laundry detergent, the constant, low-humming anxiety of not belonging anywhere. One foster mother told me my constant stomach aches were for attention, that there weren't enough doctors in the world for girls like me. I think that's when the seed was planted, the deep, quiet desire to become the person I had always needed. My first few years with Arthur and Helen felt like stepping out of a black and white film into Technicolor. They were my saviors, and they were determined to play the part perfectly. I had new dresses, a bedroom with a canopy bed, and 3 warm meals a day. I was their mission, their good deed. In return, I learned to be the perfect adoptee. I was quiet, I was helpful, and above all, I was grateful. I learned to say thank you before I was prompted, to swallow my tears, to make myself small and easy, to fit into the space they had made for me. Those were my happy years, or at least, the years I told myself were happy. The miracle happened when I was 10. After years of being told it was impossible, Helen became pregnant. The house, once so ordered and quiet, filled with a new kind of energy. It was a joyful, radiant energy that, I soon realized, had no room for me. When Isabel was born, the world tilted on its axis. I went from being the centerpiece of their project to being a piece of the scenery. It wasn't a cruel or overt shift. It was a change in atmospheric pressure. When Izzy took her first steps, they filmed it from 3 different angles. When I won the state-level science fair, I got a pat on the head and "That's nice, dear." When she cried, they rushed to her side. When I cried, I was asked if I was being dramatic. The whispers began then, the phrase that would become the anthem of my childhood, "You should be grateful. We rescued you from the system." Later, it morphed into, "After all we've done for you." And I was so deeply, achingly grateful that I tried to pay for my existence with perfect grades, with a spotless room, with silence. Izzy never had to prove anything. She just had to be. She got the ballet lessons, the brand name clothes, the assumption of love. When she broke a vase, it was an accident. When I spilled a glass of milk, it was a character flaw, a sign of the carelessness I'd brought with me. But I loved her. Of course I did. She was my baby sister, innocent in her golden bubble. When it came time for college, I never even considered asking for help. The very idea felt greedy, a betrayal of the gratitude I was supposed to embody. I told myself there was something romantic about the struggle, about working double shifts at a diner and studying under the fluorescent hum of a 24-hour library. The reality was just exhaustion, a relentless grind that wore me down to the bone. But I made it. Once I had my nursing degree, my career, I felt I owed them. After all, they'd given me a life. So the money started to flow. A little for groceries here, a new water heater there. I helped with Izzy's tuition when she went to a private arts college. It was unspoken, but it was expected. My success was their dividend. Even after I married, had Lily, and my work took me abroad, the payments continued. My father, ever practical, had set up the special account for easier international transfers. It was just the way things were. When my marriage ended and I returned to the States with Lily, I was determined she would never feel like an afterthought. She was my sun, my moon, my entire sky. Every choice was for her. And that choice had led me to a deployment on the other side of the world, to a Christmas Eve revelation, and now to a cold hotel room, staring at proof of a betrayal so calculated it stole my breath. It wasn't just the money. It was the house. They had taken my home. The day after Christmas, I made a call. Not to a stranger from a search engine, but to the one person I knew who had seen the cracks in my family's facade from the beginning. Ben Carter had been my best friend in high school, a lanky, sarcastic kid who saw the world with unnerving clarity. He'd eaten more dinners at my house than his own, and had once quietly told me, "Your parents love the idea of you, Clara. I'm not sure they know what to do with the real thing." Now, he was a lawyer with a sharp mind and a memory for injustice. He picked up on the second ring. "Clara, don't tell me you're calling from some war-torn country on Boxing Day." "Worse," I said, my voice flat. "I'm in Port Blossom. And I think my family has committed fraud." That got his attention. An hour later, we were sitting in a booth at the Salty Gull Diner, the air thick with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. I slid my laptop across the table, the screen open to the folder I'd created. Bank records. Transfer logs. Text messages. The screenshot of the fraudulent mortgage forbearance. Ben scrolled through it all, his expression shifting from curiosity to a grim, focused intensity. He read the messages where my mother had thanked me for taking such good care of the kid, and my father had confirmed the transfer dates. He lingered on the mortgage document. "She impersonated you," he said. "It wasn't a question. It looks that way. And this account," he pointed to the bank statement. "Your parents knew the $1,200 was for Lily? I have texts explicitly stating it. Sending the money for Lily's dorm. This should cover her books for the semester." I was crystal clear. Ben leaned back in the booth, exhaling slowly. "Clara, this is clean. It's not just a messy family dispute. This is theft. This is wire fraud. The mortgage thing is identity theft. This is potentially criminal." I looked at him, the reality of that word, criminal, sinking in. Will I win? He held my gaze, his expression serious. "The question isn't if you'll win. The question is, what does winning look like to you? Do you want them prosecuted? Do you want them broke? Or do you just want it to stop?" I thought of Lily's face in the car, the whispered confession that she thought I'd abandoned her. I thought of the years of being the grateful one, the family ATM, the reliable daughter who never asked for anything in return. "I want them to stop," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I want them to stop pretending I owe them everything while they take everything I have." Ben gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Okay," he said, closing the laptop. "Then I think it's time we go knock on some doors." The next morning, we drove to Hemlock Lane. My house. A wave of nausea and anger washed over me as I saw it. The porch light was still on, a cheerful yellow beacon of hypocrisy. A new, expensive-looking wreath now hung on the door, bigger and more ostentatious than my parents' simple one. Ben carried a crisp manila envelope. He looked calm, professional. I just felt numb. I walked up the path I had laid with my own hands and knocked on the door. It swung open, and there was Isabel, wrapped in a silk robe, holding a mug of coffee. She blinked at me, then a slow, mocking smile spread across her face. "Well, well. Look who decided to grace us with her presence again. Come to join the packing party?" "I brought you something," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Ben stepped forward and handed her the envelope. She took it, her smile faltering slightly. She tore it open, her eyes scanning the document inside. "An eviction notice?" She let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "Oh, that's rich. Honey, this is adorable, but you're a little late. Ben's voice was placid. It's legally binding. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. She rolled her eyes, waving the paper dismissively. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. I'm moving out anyway. I just bought my own place. A gorgeous condo downtown. I stared at her, the words not computing. You what? Closed last week, she said, beaming with pride. A little Christmas present to myself. For all my hard work. That's when I saw them over her shoulder. The living room was filled with taped-up cardboard boxes. And in the middle of it all, my parents, Arthur and Helen, were carefully wrapping my grandmother's china in newspaper. Helping her. What is going on? I asked, stepping past her into the house. My house. We're helping Izzy move, dear, my mother said, not looking up from a teacup. She found the most wonderful place. My head was spinning. I'm sorry, how? How did she buy a condo? With money, Clara, Isabel said, her voice laced with condescending sweetness. You remember what that is, right? Where did the down payment come from? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Isabel's grin was triumphant. From being smart. From saving. From not wasting thousands of dollars a month on mortgage payments. Ben raised an eyebrow. You mean the mortgage payments she was contractually obligated to pay on this house? Tomato, she shrugged. I turned to my parents. And you're okay with this? You're helping her. My father finally stood up straight, crossing his arms over his chest. His face was a mask of stubborn righteousness. She needed a home, Clara. A real start. You weren't even using this place. I wasn't using it because I was on the other side of the world, working in a field hospital to pay for Lily's education. The words tore out of me, louder than I intended. An education you stole the money for. Oh, please, my mother scoffed, setting down the teacup with a clatter. You act like we put a gun to your head. You sent the money. We had needs. Your sister had needs. Your daughter is resilient. She was fine. She was working 2 jobs and living on cereal. I shot back. She thought I had abandoned her. She didn't die, my mother said, her voice as cold as the winter sea. Stop being so dramatic. That was the moment everything clarified. There was no misunderstanding. There was no mistake. It was a choice. They had weighed my daughter's well-being against their own desires, and she had lost. Ben took a deliberate step forward. You'll be hearing from us, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. About the eviction. And the delinquent mortgage payments. And the stolen funds. And the fraud. Isabel actually laughed. Go for it. Sue me. I've moved on. I looked at my sister, at the woman who had lived in my home, used my possessions, and stolen from my child without a flicker of remorse. I looked at my parents, who had enabled and encouraged it all under the guise of family. You stole my daughter's future and you call it moving on? I asked. She smiled that glittering, empty smile. You're just jealous, she said. Because for once in your life, I'm the one who's winning. I stopped talking then. There was nothing left to say. Ben handed her a second, thicker envelope. What's this? She asked, her bravado faltering. A formal demand, Ben said calmly. For the repayment of 10 months of mortgage value, totaling $22,000. And restitution for the stolen funds intended for your niece, totaling $12,000. Plus damages. We'll be in touch about the identity theft charges separately. Isabel's face paled. Damages? For fraudulently impersonating your sister to her mortgage lender, Ben clarified. She actually had the audacity to look indignant. You should be grateful. I paused the payments for you so the house wouldn't go into foreclosure. My mother nodded in agreement. She's your sister, Clara. This is unforgivable. I looked from her face to my father's, to Isabel's. I saw the 3 of them, a united front of delusion and greed. And I felt nothing. The pain, the anger, it had all burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard certainty. I'll see you in court, I said. And I turned and walked out of my house for the last time. The courtroom was beige and suffocating, smelling of old paper and stale coffee. Their defense was as audacious as their crime. Your Honor, their lawyer began, a man whose suit seemed as uncomfortable as his argument. This is a simple family misunderstanding. The funds transferred by my client's daughter were a gift. a voluntary show of gratitude for the loving home she was provided. I almost laughed. Ben stood, calm as a lake at dawn. Your Honor, we have text messages where my client explicitly and repeatedly states the funds are for her daughter, Lily's, university expenses. He produced the printouts. The judge, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, put on her reading glasses. My father was their first witness. He walked to the stand with the solemn air of a man about to deliver a sermon. My daughter, Clara, he began, his voice thick with performative emotion, is a good woman. She's done very well for herself. When she began sending money, we assumed it was her way of giving back, of showing her gratitude. We raised her, you see. We saved her from a very difficult situation. We never asked for a thing. Then came Isabel. She was a masterclass in calculated victimhood. She dabbed at dry eyes and spoke in a soft, trembling voice. My sister, she has such a big heart. When she offered me her house, I was so grateful. I told her I'd do my best to cover the mortgage, but it was just an informal, sisterly agreement. I was going through such a hard time. Did you or did you not, Ben asked, his voice cutting through her performance, sign a rental agreement stating you would pay the mortgage in exchange for tenancy? Well, yes, she mumbled, looking at her shoes. But it wasn't, legal. The final act of their farce was presenting the fraudulent hardship pause as my idea. Their lawyer claimed I had called Isabel in a panic, begging her to handle the paperwork because I was overseas. Ben waited patiently. Your Honor, that testimony directly contradicts the rental agreement. Furthermore, we have an audio recording of the defendant, Isabel Evans, admitting to the impersonation. The judge's head snapped up. You have a recording? Yes, Your Honor. Captured legally on my client's phone. Play it. Ben clicked his laptop. And my sister's voice, cheerful and smug, filled the silent courtroom. Ben's voice, you fraudulently impersonated your sister to her mortgage lender. Isabel's voice, you should be grateful. I paused the payments for you so the house wouldn't go into foreclosure. You act like I trashed the place. A profound stillness settled over the room. Isabel's lawyer slowly set down his pen. My mother stared straight ahead, her face a mask of stone. My father seemed to shrink in his seat. The judge leaned back, her expression unreadable. Well, she said, her voice dry as dust. That's certainly enlightening. The verdict was swift and decisive. It was in my favor on all counts. Full repayment of the stolen money and the missed mortgage payments. Legal fees. Punitive damages for the fraud. In the hallway, Isabel dissolved into hysterical tears. She didn't have the money, she cried. She'd spent it all on the down payment and furnishings for her condo. She'd be bankrupt. It wasn't fair. The judge had been unmoved. 2 weeks after the ruling, when the payment deadline passed, Ben filed the necessary motions. The court placed a lien on Isabel's new condo. The property she had bought with stolen money, the symbol of her winning, was now legally entangled in the debt she owed me. Through a court-ordered settlement to avoid her complete financial ruin, the condo's title was transferred to me, its equity almost exactly covering the judgment. The day the papers were signed, I felt a quiet, clean sense of release. I called a real estate agent. I listed both houses, the one on Hemlock Lane and the condo downtown. It was time to cut the last ties to that life. Then I called Lily. She was in her dorm room, studying for a final. So, she said, her voice calm and even. We won. We did, I said. There was a pause. I quit the bookstore job, she said. I'm going to keep the coffee shop shift, though. Just on Saturdays. I kind of like it. The smell of the beans. I smiled, a real smile that reached my eyes. Good, I said. You deserve to do things just because you like them. Selling the houses didn't take long. With the proceeds, I paid off the last of the mortgage, set up a trust to cover the entirety of Lily's education, undergrad, and any graduate school she chose, and put the rest into a retirement fund for myself. For the first time in my adult life, I felt the solid ground of security beneath my feet. I didn't go back overseas. I found a job at a local clinic, a quiet position with regular hours. I rented a small, light-filled apartment overlooking the water, just a short drive from Lily's campus. We had dinner every Tuesday. We took walks along the waterfront, talking about everything and nothing. The weariness in her eyes was gone, replaced by a bright, focused passion. She was thriving. We never spoke of them. It was an unspoken agreement. They had ceased to exist in our world. One evening, as we were making pasta, she said, offhandedly, I blocked them all on my phone. And social media. Mom, Dad, Izzy. Good, I said simply. I don't even feel guilty, she added, a note of surprise in her voice. You have nothing to feel guilty for, I said, tapping my fork against hers in a silent toast. Sometimes, when the fog rolls in from the sound and the mournful horn from the lighthouse echoes across the water, I think about them. I don't feel anger anymore, or even sadness. I just feel a sense of profound distance, as if I'm looking at a photograph of people I used to know. People who taught me the hardest and most valuable lesson of my life. Some say that family is the bedrock of your life, the one thing you can always count on. But I've learned that's not always true. Sometimes, family is a story you tell yourself until the story falls apart. And I've learned that true bedrock isn't something you're given. It's something you have to build for yourself, stone by painful stone, until you finally have a place solid enough to stand, a place where you can finally, truly breathe.